Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Actually Do You Know What podcast. And this is a special one. It's our first one on camera. So do bear with us because we're still getting to grips with it. But today we're talking about cults. And we've selected a few here and we've both taken two each. So we're going to go through them one by one. And just talk through them. And we might give a bit of a breakdown of cults and in general sort of what draws people to them and the effects they have and all that sort of stuff. But
we felt it'd be a decent carry on from religion because, well, I mean, people have questioned what the difference between a cult and a religion is, so it's very easy to intermingle the two. I mean, it seemed like the right episode to move on to next, and it was a nice lighthearted one to start our first video with. So we thought that hopefully people would, have an interest in watching the video, maybe just for the sake that the content of the actual audio itself was quite interesting still.
Yeah.
Well, the two were as well named the ones we decided to research a bit. So I said I'd cover Scientology and the Children of God, or the Family International, whatever you know it as or don't know it as. It's had a few different names, and Luke said he'd cover...
Yeah, so I did the People's Temple. You probably know it better from the Jonestown Massacre, which was, until 9/11, was the most American civilian casualties in a single non-natural event, which is a bit of a heavy thing. And the Heaven's Gate cult as well, which is another mass suicide. So I picked some very fun.
Yeah, very light-hearted, conversational ones to go with. And as well, like Luke said, this is probably more to those of you listening on just the audio. We're going to be trying to address you watching to a fair extent because it's our first one. We don't really know how to judge it up and see what's what and what deserves the majority of the attention. So if you feel like it's different in any way, it's because it is.
Yeah.
And hopefully you just bear with us and while we're trying to get used to it, and we'll watch back the episode and see what it looks like and what it sounds like and everything. And hopefully the content will stay to the level that it was at, not that level was insanely high as it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of a disorientation here because I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking at the camera and then I'm looking at the display and then I'm trying to speak into this microphone and I'm getting a bit confuzzled here, but...
Yeah, it's kind of hard because, when it's just the two of us sitting here and we're just doing the audio, like, the talking into the mic comes natural because it's just there in front of you, and then we're spending our time between looking at laptops and looking at each other because, when you're having a conversation with someone, it's the natural thing to do, to make eye contact to a certain extent, but now with balancing the three, like, still, look, there's far harder things to do, and even if you listen back to our last episode, that was a harder conversation to have, so we can't really make any complaints or any excuses for ourselves, but just bear with us in that we're getting used to it. Like, we're sure we can come accustomed to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, 100%.
Also, I can't see the visuals, so Luke has aforementioned that if there's any issues, he'll let me know, but hopefully there won't be. I can't see why there would be.
You never know. Anyway, so I think I'll just jump into it with the People's Temple cult, which was responsible for the Jonestown Massacre.
Actually, before you get into it, sorry for interrupting, but this is the same with the conspiracy theory episode in that I don't really know much about either of the ones. Obviously, everyone's heard of the Jonestown Massacre, but I don't know much about it. He doesn't know that much about the ones I was looking up. We just tried to keep it as much where I'm reacting it to the same way that the audience will be reacting to it. Or,
exactly, yeah.
Thinking it through. Anyway, sorry.
Alright, so the People's Temple cult was led by Jim Jones. He was born James Warren Jones in May 19th, 1931 in Indiana. And he was born into quite a poor family. And there was documentaries about it, and his friends, well, he didn't really have friends, but people around his neighborhood sort of described him as a really weird kid. One guy in a documentary called Jonestown, The Life and Death of People's Temple said he was obsessed with religion and obsessed with death. And a friend of his told him that he saw him kill a cat with a knife. And what he used to do was
healthy childhood behavior.
Yeah, what he used to do was he'd collect loads of animals and bring them into his barn, because he lived in a rural town at first. Bring them into a barn and then do services for them. And then when one of the animals died, he'd do a funeral and give a big, powerful speech. And that's why he killed the cat, because he had no cats were dying, so he had to make a funeral. He had to practice, like. Yeah, but he was very weird. And looking back, you can probably see that he would have been responsible for one of the biggest mass suicides in history, because he would have been around during World War II, like he was a child then, and his friend said that he was weirdly impressed by Hitler's suicide. When Hitler committed suicide, he was like, "Whoa, what a legend." Everyone was after him, he just killed himself.
I feel like any level of being impressed is kind of weirdly impressed.
Yeah, so that was him. So he was very neglected as a child. He was very poor and he was very outcast. Like, he didn't get on with people, not just because he was a weird child, but because he was poor and everything. So he was actually very famous for being a black rights activist. He became a pastor in a local church because it was the only place he could actually, exercise any bit of power. But also he felt sort of accepted there as well. So this was in the 1960s, when just black people didn't have any rights. There was separate black churches, and if you were in a mixed church, the black people were in the back, white people in the front. But he was a big advocate of fully integrated churches, women, whatever, gays, anything under the sun, which might have been at the time very discriminated against. He didn't care. He wanted to make a community in which everyone was accepted. So he became a pastor, and eventually he started his own church, which originally was not called People's Temple. It was called something like Community Unity, and he'd go around and knock on everyone's door or whatever. But that was his mission. But in saying that, he was a self-professed agnostic or atheist. He was just big into communism, which is a red flag for me. Communism and mass death go hand in hand. But yeah, he was a communist, and the way he wanted to spread these communist ideals, obviously coming from a poor family, he wanted to, create equality. So he thought the way to do it was religion. So he created this church, People's Temple, and the way he attracted attention to it was doing faith healings. He was so mad for doing it, man. He didn't create it. Like, he got inspiration and he got teaching from this fella called Father Divine, who also ran a cult.
Hilarious name as well.
If his wife is Mother Divine. But anyway, he saw the draw that faith healings had and how much they solidified your cause. He started doing faith healings, and he'd do the obvious thing of just planting audience members, and he did one over and over. I don't know how people didn't catch on. He got one of his secretaries to come into the place in a wheelchair, and then he'd like, "You over there, walk up to the altar," and she'd be like, "No, I'm crippled, I can't," and he'd just be like, and then she'd walk and she'd run up to the altar, and everyone would be like, "Yeah." And this is the biggest power move ever. There was people that came to his services purely just to disagree with him, they're out and out skeptics. So on the way in, like, he was spying on everybody. He'd slip drugs into their drinks or whatever. He'd drug them in some way so that during the service they'd actually pass out. So it'd look as if they had died during the service, so that everyone would be like, "Oh shit, we better not disagree with him." But when they came back to consciousness, he made it as though he saved their lives. So they'd be there passed out on the thing, and he'd just be like... But the best one was, a woman was drugged as well in church, and she passed out. And when she woke up, the church staff told her she'd broken her leg, and they put a cast in her and everything.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So she came back to church the next week, and he goes, walk up to me right now, and she goes, I can't, I have a broken leg, and he takes off the cast, not anymore, and she walks, and she was like, oh my god, I can walk. It's as if her leg wasn't actually broken in the first place, but that's not my business. But yeah, basically he started getting more and more popular, and he started getting more sort of scared of the threat of nuclear war, because this was around the time of post World War II. It was very tensions were rising and all that sort of stuff. So he first moved his followers over to a place in California that was on a list of the top 10 places not to die in a nuclear holocaust.
Oh.
And a few people moved over there, but the US government was sort of getting very, skeptical of him, because he had such a big following and he was a big commie, and, he was doing some very backhanded things. Like, he was getting loads and loads of money from this. So he went to Venezuela, to a place called Guyana, and founded Jonestown. It's just a commune there for, it was meant to be utopia, socialist, communist utopia, whatever. And eventually he got over 900 people to go there. The reason as well was, once you're there, you're not going to leave. Where are you going to go? He got everyone to sign over their social security checks and everything and their earnings, and you're not going to get out of there. You leave. Sure, you don't.
Yeah, once you're brainwashed in the state to get in there in the first place, what are the chances of...
Yeah.
If you were heavily influenced by it when you're not totally surrounded by it, when you're totally surrounded by it, you're kind of fucked.
Yeah, so he had everyone in this compound with armed guards everywhere. And if you ever listen to clips of the stuff he'd be playing over intercoms, it's the scariest shit ever. He would 24/7 just be blaring sermons, and he'd have so much stuff that he couldn't fit it all, so he had to write over tapes. So it's just a mess of God will save you when you're trying to sleep and everything. So yeah, people weren't happy, and there was word getting back to the US from families of sort of disgruntled followers. So a senator named Leo Ryan, or a US representative, I'm not sure what the distinction in there is, went over to investigate. And Jones wasn't too happy, but he, in the end of the day, he had to oblige. So your man came, and as he was leaving, he goes, if anyone wants to come with me now, do, if you want to leave, come now. So a few people left, and Jones saw this as this is it. So he sent a minibus filled with armed guards, whatever, to the airport. And just as they're about to get on the plane, he shot your man, the senator, and I think he killed 4 and injured a few others. And then when the word got back to the camp, he goes, look, the Venezuelans or the Americans are going to kill us now. And he cited some quote from this guy that it was better to kill yourself than get killed by somebody else. So what he did was he made a big concoction of Kool-Aid. Well, it was Flavor Aid. Kool-Aid company is very adamant that it wasn't their brand. But yeah, a big load of Flavor Aid, and mixed it with cyanide. And there's videos of the actual speeches, or recordings of the speeches that he gave. And you can hear the children crying and everything. So he said, give it to the children first, and then give it to the rest of them. And it was ruled as a mass suicide at first, but at the same time there was armed guards all over the place, and if you didn't drink it there, you're going to get shot anyway. So yeah, at the end of the day, 914 people died, including him. If you ever see pictures of it, it's ridiculous. Like
Luke, when we were thinking up this idea, Luke mentioned it. Now I hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
And for anyone that's watching, just look up Jonestown Massacre
Yeah.
and look up images, and it's the craziest shit you're ever going to see.
I left out this part here, just for a bit of a funny one. At first, he was against
Going from 900 people dying to a bit of a funny one is a questionable segue, but hey.
We got to leave it on a good note. But Jones was against making his followers abstain from sex, and this Father Divine guy did just that in his cult. And Jones is like, never. But Jones wanted to have as much power as possible over his disciples, so he made them abstain from sex. But he was notorious for like going out and, even the followers, he'd be like, I don't want to do this, but it's the only way we can connect, so you have to.
Yeah.
And he even had a secretary manage his fuck schedule, which is what he called it. But
I was going to say, if that's not a quote, that's the weirdest thing you've said in the whole podcast so far.
No, that's what it was. But the funniest thing, he got arrested. The charges were later dropped, but he got arrested for trying to solicit a male prostitute in Los Angeles. And his followers were like, firstly, like, what happened to abstinence? And then secondly, wait, you're gay? And to that, he said, quote, no, this is a quote from someone else saying what Jim Jones said, but he said, quote, Jim said that all of us were homosexuals. Everyone except him. He was the only heterosexual. he was the only heterosexual on the planet, and that all the women were all lesbians, and all the guys were all gay. So he said as well, any urge to be with the opposite sex was you trying to make up for your gayness. So
take that as you may.
Yeah, but you can see he started.
Just to think that the same guy that said that was able to, brainwash 900 people to come to a commune in Venezuela and die with them.
Yeah, and the funniest thing is, he'd stop at nothing to convince people. And he tried to get more followers by, once that Father Divine guy died, he went to that guy's commune, his cult, and he walked in the front gate and he goes, it's me, it's Father Divine, I've been reincarnated as Jim Jones.
Oh my god.
And only a few people followed him. But yeah, he also said that he was the reincarnated form of Mahatma Gandhi.
Oh my god.
Jesus, Buddha, and Vladimir Lenin. But yeah.
And wait, what year was it?
So he was born in 1931, and the whole thing happened in
the 70s or something, no?
November 18th, 1978. So
to think that like that our parents were alive when people were able to be convinced by this guy about this thing is, oh my god.
But one thing I must add though is that, okay, when he had the commune in Venezuela, that was the point at which it was ridiculous. But before that, he was the first person. He adopted loads of I can't think of the word. He adopted loads of foreign children. So he had a black son, three Korean sons, one Native American daughter, and all of his churches were non-segregated. He had soup kitchens, he had rehabilitation clinics, he had an old person's home. He had everything under the sun. He was doing so much good for the community, and loads of people joined to do good.
Yeah.
And then they sort of got swayed when, they weren't really thinking that he was Buddha reincarnated, but they were doing it because of that, and then that's why he drew so many people in.
Jeez, like when people hear of, like, if you don't look into it at all and all you hear is Jonestown Massacre, like like you're not expecting to hear half that stuff, and you're definitely not expecting to laugh at some of the things he said. But like if you're listening to that and not smiling, I don't understand your sense of humor, to be honest.
Yeah, but like that's the thing. Like there's some stuff there that's so funny, and then you sort of have to take a step back and be like, "Fuck, this is 914 people." Like,
yeah, it's like who was it? I think it was Putin. Not Putin. Sorry, but Stalin said about something about like one person dying and it's a death, and loads of people dying and it's statistics.
1 million dying, it's a statistic.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of that when it's so many people and it's a while ago and it's so far from us, it's hard.
Yeah.
Like obviously, it's a terrible thing, and like if you look at the pictures, like they're really moving pictures, and that if you consider these people as family members of others, it's crazy.
Yeah. Like,
but also when you're just discussing things that this guy said, without us being able to, like, obviously that's all we attribute him to is the massacre, but like when you're just listening to that, like, I think it's a normal enough reaction. It's a good reaction, like.
Yeah, like even when we're doing episode 2 on evil, and I was reading that book Ordinary Men by, forget his name, something Browning.
Christopher Browning.
Christopher Browning, yeah. Obviously, everyone knows that there's about 6 million Jews that died during the Holocaust. But you think of that and you're like, that's a big number. But you don't have much more... To be honest, most of the time you're more horrified when you hear one person being murdered in your town or whatever. That's ridiculous. But then, when I was reading the book, he did so many accounts of like 1,000 people being killed.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom what that means. Yeah,
and it's like... It's hard to imagine how bad 1,000 people is, but then you realize, in 6 million, there's, I don't want to do that. Can't do the maths right now, but there's so many thousands.
6,000, I think.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. But anyway, so obviously it's a very, very tragic event, but there is a few quotes there that were definitely.
Yeah, and that's actually, it's good that you started with that, because I'm going to go on to talk about the children of God now, and it's funny how much, it's not funny, but it's just weird how many similarities there are between Jim Jones and the founder of the Children of God. So for anyone who's not familiar with the Children of God, I wasn't until we decided to do this episode, and we were looking up different ideas, and that was one that just it fell to me, and if you look at it at all, it's pretty interesting. But for anyone that's not familiar, go and look up David Berg. David Berg's the founder of the Children of God, and this man looks like the craziest bag of shit that you're ever going to see in your life. Like, the thought of people following this guy with the way he looks is absolutely insane, and I don't understand it at all.
Yeah.
But the stories actually is crazy. So like, in the 17th century, David Berg's ancestors emigrated from Germany to the United States. They were German Jews, and they left to go to the United States for religious freedom. So religion was always in his family and his ancestry, and that carried on into his parents. So I think it was his father got involved with a certain organization, a religious organization, and then that carried down onto his mother, and his mother married a fella who the father got into the same way of thinking, and they all got involved in the same religion, and they all became evangelical preachers and Christians, and the mother was quite a big deal in the group, in that she traveled the country anyways, preaching, and it was just, she was a really big deal. And so he grew up in that sort of lifestyle, in the back of a van traveling around the country. But a massive part of his childhood was that when he was 3, he got molested by his babysitter. So the woman that they had minding him molested him, and the mother dealt with it by firing the woman, and that's all that was done. So there was no charges pressed, there was nothing said to David when he was growing up. No coping mechanisms put in place, anything like that. And I mean, if you think about it, he's 3, so in a way you'd be kind of thinking that he'd forget about it, or he wouldn't realize it, but with the way his life went on, it's quite clear once you see that it definitely had a lasting impact on his life. Yeah, so he grew up his whole life being really religious and traveling around with his mother and driving her, being the chauffeur and stuff like that. And when he was, in his teenage years and going through puberty, he kind of developed some weird sexual characteristics and sexual ideas and stuff like that. And he became basically a chronic masturbator, and like his mother used to not, it wasn't like she saw this was happening and related that back to what happened when he was 3. So she saw this happening and she really shamed him on it. So like sometimes there was times when he'd be caught in the van doing it, and she'd like hold his hands so that he couldn't get more privacy, so he couldn't cover up himself. Or like at one time they were at a family dinner and he was doing it and she brought him out in front of the family. But even throughout this, like this stuff was happening, but he really kept a close relationship with his mother. Like she was a really dominating figure in his life, and that kind of lasted until she died. That she was this overarching matriarchal figure that he always felt inferior to her, and that obviously shaped a lot of his religious beliefs and things like that. But then his parents tried to get him as a minister or into a ministry, but he ended up leaving because there was allegations made of sexual assault on I think she was 17 and he was 20, maybe between 20 and 23. So obviously it was illegal, and that they moved him on from that ministry. They let him go or kicked him out, whatever way you want to look at it. And he went to college anyways, and he started getting into philosophy and socialism. So he began to find in religion that was the true way of getting towards a more socialist utopia, that like this capitalist society, it echoes greed and selfishness, and the preaching God's word and everything like that, leads you down another path that's more righteous and stuff like that. So at that time as well, he was kind of moving further from what his mother and his father's, what their group's beliefs would have been. And he moved to, I can't remember quite where it was, but he moved to Huntington Beach, where I think he started preaching somewhere in the middle of the country, and he married a woman and he had 3 kids, I think, and he molested his kids, but it happened because he was going around preaching and stuff like that. He was involved with a certain ministry, and he was going around preaching, and he'd be on these trips, and he'd say to his daughter like this, your mother's not fulfilling my sexual needs. And obviously his daughter had the inclination that this was wrong, but she was kind of young at the time as well. I'm not sure, was she 11? She wrote a memoir actually about the whole thing. So it happened anyways that he did molest all of his kids at some stage. But after that he was kind of moving around, and he never quite felt like he was gaining too much power anywhere, and that's kind of always what he wanted. He liked being, this controlling figure. But his mother had been preaching, or she was working in a place that was half a coffee shop, half a center for her faith or whatever, in Huntington Beach, California, and that's where the cult started. Like that's the known spawn ground of it. So he moved there anyways, and he was really in his element when he was there. So he began working there as well, and it kind of began to phase out his mother. This was a time in the 60s when the hippie movement was massive and rebellious movement was massive. So the fact that he was preaching this socialist kind of religion, that people, that the system was out to get you and this and that, and it was aimed at, well, I don't know if it was aimed, but it definitely got the tightest grip on teenagers. Like I think before it was Children of God, I think it was like Teens for Christ or something like that. And so he got a quite an accumulation of teenagers following his way of thinking. And anyways, there was this. I think his mother died when he was there, and that kind of was the moment when he felt like he was gaining the most control. So they moved. He had about 100 followers or so, and they spent a night in the desert, and in the desert he met this other woman called, I might be able to get her name here actually. Oh yeah, Karen Zerby. So Jane Miller was his original wife, and Karen Zerby was a woman that he met on that night, and her views aligned very well with his own. And he left his wife and his kids there and spent the night with this woman in the caravan. So his wife was used to him having sex outside of their marriage, and she knew about his sex with underage kids and stuff like that as well, but he had kind of them into the way of thinking that this was okay somehow. But this Karen Zerby one became like that. They became enveloped in each other, and she was the woman that was going to lead this faith with him. So he wanted to be known as Moses David. So, and her name changed as well to another religious name that I can't think of, but like they just got completely enveloped in their own thinking, and she organized with someone to move to, I'm not sure, another part in the middle of the country, and they spent the night in a barn, and he preached for 19 hours straight, and they thought that like this guy was everything. And when his mother had died, he became, and after that 19 hours of preaching, he went from being a preacher to being a prophet. So he began to see himself as a prophet, and that's kind of when the group began to change a fair bit, because it wasn't now that he was spreading the word of God, it was that he was receiving the word of God and he was going to interpret it and give it to these people.
Yeah.
So then he kind of, it never became a commune in the sense of Jonestown. It was always a massive part was spreading this to other people. So like the thing is, it's crazy because they spent a lot of time like that. People went to South America, Mexico, they went to Europe. Like at one stage he had kind of thought that when the end of days comes that America will be the first to go because of the way it's conducted itself. So that they targeted these more socialist countries, you know, South America, Europe, countries at that time were, you know, considering that possibility. But there was a time when he began to get very suspicious of everything, and he kind of began to seclude himself from the group. So there was a period when he just started moving away from the group, and they stopped seeing him. Even in pictures, they began to cover his face with a cartoon lion. And instead, they received these things called Mo letters from him. So it was because he was Moses that they received Mo letters. And in these Mo letters, it was his teaching from God. And like they were very colloquial written letters, and it was just, this was what the group was to abide by. And as time went on, it kind of got stricter and stricter. And throughout the whole thing, there had been this element of sex being okay. And it began to grow more and more a prominent part of the faith. So he was kind of saying that, you know, God's always there. Like the way to spread God's love is through sex. Like we were given sex because God wanted to show us how much he loves us, and this and that. And it was very much polygamous relationships, you know, people were having sex with other partners when they were married and things like this. But I think it was 3,000 Mo letters he had written over a 10-year period or maybe 20-year period, which is quite a lot of letters. Like he just, at a point when he became very secluded, he moved from America to the UK, and he began to write a lot about what they called, or he began to institute this idea of flirty fishing. So
I heard about this.
Yeah, so the whole idea with flirty fishing was that the women of the group would go out and have sex with men in an
Yeah.
attempt to get them into the group.
Yeah, it was in another cult as well.
I'd say it's any
A
cult
fair
that
few,
devolves
yeah.
into a sex cult, like it further devolves into roping people in with sex.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea, like when he got really secluded, his daughter writes about it in the memoir, and she says that, you know, he became an alcoholic. So like for 20 years, this guy was writing Mo letters as an alcoholic, dictating what everything people should do with their lives. Like it became so, like he was telling people how many pieces of toilet paper they should use and everything. Like he wanted to be in control of every aspect of their life, and it was insane. And even he used his wife, Karen, as like for this flirty fishing. Like they'd go out to a club and she'd start talking to a guy and bring him home and have sex, and like both throughout and after the sex, she'd be confessing her faith and everything to this fella, and you know, telling him that this is a blessing from God and all this, which is absolutely whack.
Imagine that. Imagine you go out in the pool and you're just there like talking about God.
Oh, like I just, and the thing is, they say that they got over 100,000 converts with this method.
How many?
100,000.
Fuck.
And obviously those numbers can't be the case, but at the same time, it's not an insignificant number of people that were in the cult. Like recent records have even shown that there could be 20,000 people still involved in this faith, and like that's very large. But also when you compare it to other ones like Scientology, where there's millions, or Mormonism, where there's millions,
Yeah.
and Scientology and stuff, like it's a mediocre sized cult, but it always had this strong sexual inclination that made it okay to almost force sex on other people. They made it okay to sexually abuse kids, and I think that's where people got their massive problem with it, obviously. But like the main reason he began to get so like he began to think so inward and seclude himself from everything was because he was nervous about these groups that were protesting against the cult. So obviously he didn't want to show it to the group, but he kept to himself. But at one point, him and Karen Zerby were in Costa. It was, I don't know, I think it was somewhere in Spain. So that's where they had moved to at this point, and she had sex with this fella as part of this flirty fishing, and 9 months later she gave birth to a child, and that child's name was Ricky Rodriguez. And Ricky, David started to say was, you know, he was the chosen one, that this man was the next in line to take over the faith once he left. And Ricky at a point wasn't told who his mother was and was moved out from the group, and later on Ricky found his mother and killed her and then killed himself. So I mean, like, all of it, like with any of these cults, there's always that aspect where it's really terrible and then it peaks at someone gets killed or someone murders another person. Like loads of these,
it's a domino effect. Like
like there's women who were in the cult that recalled knowing 100 people who committed suicide since leaving the cult. Like, but then there's people who, like, there's famous people who've come out of this cult, like Joaquin Phoenix and River Phoenix were both born into this cult. Yeah. There was another actress, I can't remember her name. Like, it had quite a big reach, and like obviously Huntington Beach, California at that time was a massive like youth destination, and it gained such control over these people's lives. But it was obviously the manner in which the faith was preached that was the massive problem.
This is like the height of like the sexual liberation thing as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So it tied into that whole free sex kind of movement.
Yeah, like a lot of people probably would have joined it just they don't care about what they're preaching, but
just free sex.
Yeah. Fair enough.
No, like it's honestly, it's a crazy fucking story. But he ended up dying in like 94, and Karen took over the faith, and she ended up marrying the guy who had been like an assistant or something. And I think she obviously she was killed by Ricky Rodriguez. And yeah, that other guy is still carrying on the faith, but I don't think it's as centralized as it was when David Berg was in charge. But again, please listen to what I said. Don't listen to what I said. Go and look up fucking David Berg. The man is like, I'm sitting here. It's been the picture on my screen. Those of you watching the video can see that I've kept looking back at the screen, and it's him on Wikipedia, and it's just a fucking nightmare.
We might even after, we'll see, like splice it in on the screen or something.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah.
We're not exactly sure what we can do with the visuals as of yet. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure we kind of know we can, but it's a matter of finding out how.
Can we? Yeah, like, are we capable of ourselves
as human beings? Yeah.
Yeah, as individuals.
Yeah. So I mean, the fact that there's still probably 20,000 of these people out here that are following this doctrine that went off Mo's letters written by a drunk guy for 20 years.
Yeah.
Maybe you're one of them.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not. Hey.
Exactly. There, listen to that as well. There was a good few similarities between the People's Temple. I forgot to tell one story.
I just want to butt in, sorry, before you get to it.
Are you still...
No, I'm finished, but I just wanted to say, like, I think this shows a lot about cults. The fact that we could have picked any four cults, and two of them that we picked are almost identical in terms of leadership.
Yeah. And that they're both socialists. If that's not
the main issue here.
Yeah.
For those of you listening that might be holding socialist beliefs, hey ho, you're in a cult.
Watch out.
The guy actually looks a bit like Slavoj Žižek or whatever his name is.
But yeah, your man Jim Jones, he didn't have many friends as a child because he would lower the children in his neighbourhood, when he was a child as well, into his barn, lock the door, and start preaching.
This man, like he did terrible things, but in a way you gotta respect the hustle.
But yeah, he'd lock the door, and he wouldn't open it until he'd finished his preaching. And at one point, it went overnight or something, and one of the kids, this is not 100% like definitely the case. It was like it was a statement from someone in the documentary. But said one of the friends said he was lured in, and after a few hours he goes, "I have enough of this." He walked out the door, and he sort of ran out the front door. He turned around, and Jim Jones is there with his father's pistol, and he tried to shoot him, and so he ran away, and
he was a very intense preacher. That's what we'll say.
Yeah, he'd probably know him to see. He's famous for his slicked back black hair and his sunglasses. But yeah, very full on individual.
Yeah, he doesn't look as whack as Davey, but
no, not definitely not.
But he's thereabouts.
Will we head on to the next one? So next cult.
Yeah, I think so. We're way further into this than I thought we'd be with two. Like, we've only touched on two, and we're already
44 minutes in.
What was the other one you said you were going to talk about?
Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. We'll see if we'll get to Scientology. I mean, like, Scientology could almost take its own, just because it's such a well-known one, and there's more to probably unpack to give people an idea of what it is. But anyways, go on.
Yeah, sure, I'll do 10 minutes, and you can do 15 minutes or whatever, and then we'll be on to the hour 15, and we're golden.
Sound. Or just go get through the story, and we'll see where we're going. Don't have to put any time limits on. Fuck.
All right. So Heaven's Gate was a cult founded in 1974 by Bonnie Nettles. That's her real name.
Another hilarious name.
And Marshall Applewhite.
Another hilarious name.
So they're both born. Bonnie was born in 1927. Marshall in 1931, and they both.
Wait, sorry. Before you move on, I've searched up Jim Jones here on Wikipedia. Do you know what his child's name is?
There's a few, yeah.
Stephen Gandy Jones.
Yeah. Oh, there's some awful bad names.
Oh my god. Wait, I'm just looking up. There's none as hilarious as Stephen Gandy Jones.
And he's the only biological child, and the adopted black son was Jim Jones Jr.
Yeah.
And everywhere he went, he'd be like, not this is Jim or this is Junior. This is my adopted black son.
What?
Your man did an interview, and he was like, I wasn't his son. I wasn't Jim Jr. I was his adopted black son, not his son.
Oh my god.
But yeah, he wanted to have like a rainbow family is what he called it. So he got, if he was able to, he would have had every nationality in his house. He didn't even really care about them. He just wanted them as trophies, basically.
That is absolute. Oh my! I was sorry for interrupting, but Stephen fucking Gandhi Jones, man.
Anyway, so Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite were the leaders of this cult, and they both met after each of their marriages fell apart. So Marshall Applewhite, his marriage fell apart because he was a college or a high school music teacher, and he was caught having an affair with one of his male students. And then Bonnie, I don't know what happened to her. She's a bit of a crackpot anyway. She used to go out in the garden with her daughter looking for UFOs to take them away.
As you do.
Fair enough. But yeah, these guys, when they got together, they were like sort of, I don't know, did they actually marry or they weren't going out, because I think he was gay, Marshall, but sex was a no-go in this cult. But yeah, they went around preaching this, preaching their faith. I'll get into what exactly they're talking about, but they started off in Christianity, and they said that they were the two witnesses in the book of Revelations that I'm not sure exactly what happened, but they in the Bible what happened was these two people were witnesses to something or other, I'm not sure. They were killed, and so then they ascended to heaven. So then they said they descended onto earth again in these earthly disguises in order to, bring the people back. So the central belief of the group was that the followers could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting their human nature, and they would ascend to heaven, or the next level, or the evolutionary level above human. So this was all good until Bonnie Nettles died of brain cancer, and the followers went, why is her body still here? I thought she was going to be taken off by UFO, because that's what they were saying. And then your man Marshall Applewhite, they went by T and Doe. So Marshall was Doe and Bonnie was T. So they're just going by like complimentary names. So like, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do.
That's fucking stupid.
And stuff like Bo and Peep, as in Little Bo Peep. Really cringy stuff, but... So yeah, they were talking about this, and then after Bonnie died, everyone was like, why is her body still here on Earth? And he goes, when I said UFO, I actually meant your body's a vessel, and you just go up. You leave your body. That's it.
Yeah.
That was grand. So yeah, they said that the bodies are merely a container or a vehicle for the soul, and that when they died, their consciousness will be transferred to the new level bodies. So there wasn't much in the way of... I won't be going into too much of what they did, because there's videos online of his preaching, of his sermons. They're... Firstly, you should probably look at a picture. The fella, his sermons, I watched some of them, and he stares. He's like this, literally. He doesn't blink for like 5 minutes at a time.
Wait, what was the guy's name again?
Marshall Applewhite. But yeah, basically, let's see, do I have anything else to add here?
Oh, I did see pictures of this guy before.
Yeah, they're very common. You probably know it from any like YouTube video on like cults. He's there.
Yeah.
But anyway, one thing that Marshall did as well, he he sort of tried to persuade his followers to get castrated, because he was having a hard time not having sex with men. So he said, I'm going to go to Mexico and get castrated so I don't have to think about that side of things anymore. So one of his other followers also got castrated. Yeah, and basically they're just preparing to ascend. So they're trying to get prepared for this. So they went out on camping trips. They just stayed in the forest and they got money off getting rich. Jesus. Getting like rich kids with trust funds to get into the cult and then give them all their money and all that type of stuff. And eventually they ended up getting a really big mansion, which is where they ended up doing the mass suicide that happened in the end. And they put a full page ad in like it wasn't the New York Times, it was like really famous magazine anyway. So when they were out camping one of the days, there was wildfires far away, and because of this there was a red tinge to the moon, and Marshall Applewhite goes, that's the sign, we have to get ready. So they went and they wanted to coincide their mass suicide with the approach of a comet called the Hale-Bopp comet. So they got prepared, and in their mansion in San Diego County, they committed suicide by eating phenobarbital, which is a poison or chemical mixed with applesauce, and they washed it down with vodka for good measure. But the funniest thing about this, funny not as in humorous,
again not funny,
funny not as in humorous, funny as in weird, was they all wore identical uniforms, which was
you say funny as in not funny, funny as in weird, and proceed to laugh about them all wearing uniforms.
You'll see why. It was black shirt and black pants, and it was essential that they had black and white Nike Decades.
I thought that is pretty funny.
And even before they did the mass suicide, they had to wear Nike shoes because Marshall was such a big fan of Nike that
forget Jordan, man. Marshall Applewhite needs his own brand of Nikes.
Such a big fan of Nike that he could only wear Nike shoes, and the slogan of the cult soon became "Just Do It," but they put his name Doe.
Just do it.
Just
no way.
But yeah, and another thing as well.
This has to be the biggest practical joke, the most dangerous practical joke that's ever taken place.
In part of the uniforms as well was armbands that had. This is a Star Trek reference and I don't get it, but it's funny anyway.
Is that why the background is like that in all his videos, the Star Trek kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. If you look up the picture of him, the first two pictures it shows is with this weird background that looks kind of Star Trek-y.
Yeah. And they thought as well that they were going to be ascended into extraterrestrial form. But the armbands read Heaven's Gate Away Team, which is a Star Trek reference I heard, but...
That's kind of just funny.
But each person as well...
Again, 39 people died here. This isn't funny.
I don't get this now, but each member had a $5 bill and 3 quarters in their pocket. And apparently it was a humorous way to tell us that they had left the planet permanently. That's a quote from, it doesn't say here, but from former members. And the $5 bill was for covering the cost of vagrancy laws.
Oh my god, I was going to look up what does it mean, but obviously you have it there.
What does vagrancy mean? Look that up, I'm not sure.
This is terrible for the people listening on audio. It's the state of living as a vagrant, homelessness.
Oh, right. And the quarters were for calling home from payphones.
That is fucking terrible. Like, did they do it as a joke? Like, they said it as a joke.
Yeah, as a joke, sort of.
The fact that you're going to kill yourself and you're like, I'm going to leave some change in my pocket as this hilarious joke.
But anyway, so the way they did it, if you look at the video, there's a video. I'll get into why there's a video of the whole crime scene. But each member, they did it in 3 days. So 15 the first day, 15 the second day, and 9 the third day, including Marshall Applewhite, because Bonnie Nettles was long dead by this stage.
Yeah.
So once each member was dead, a living member would arrange the body. So okay, wait. They ate the poison, chased it with vodka, and put a plastic bag over their heads and just lie down on a mattress. And then when they died, another member would take the plastic bag off, put a purple cloth over, and leave them at it. And then 15 died the first day, 15 the second day, and then 9 the last day. And that was... Oh no, wait, I just read this here.
To be fair though, like, if you were brainwashed into thinking that, like, it'd be such a good way to die. Like,
Yeah.
obviously these people's lives went way too soon, and it's terrible for families involved.
Yeah.
But I mean, the people died, like, ecstatic and so excited at the idea that they were about to transcend.
But they weren't like, we need to commit suicide. This was, we need to get into new bodies. I can't wait. But I read this quote here. I took it down. I don't know why. But in an interview with Harry Robinson, that name is relevant. 2 surviving members said the identical clothing was used as a uniform to represent unity. And the Nike decades were chosen because they got a good deal. But anyway, so so I don't know.
No, sorry. We've laughed so much about the 2 mass suicides, and the one cult that we took pretty serious without laughing, bar the guy being crazy looking, was the sexual abuse one. And obviously sexual abuse is terrible.
Yeah.
But like in these other 2, it combined 950 people died basically.
Yeah, 914 the first one, 39 originally in the mass suicide, and a few others committed suicide because they had missed the boat and they were sad.
Oh, that's crazy.
So yeah, I don't know who was in charge of this because I thought all the members died here. But after this had happened, they sent out packages with 2 videotapes. This is one with Doe's final exit. I read this already and I just thought it was a sermon, but it might be him dying. I'm not sure. Anyway,
it's a sermon.
And just farewell messages from all the other group members. You can find them on YouTube. Actually, the farewells.
Like video farewells.
Yeah, video farewells, and they're like, "I'm so happy to be in my new body."
Jeez, how horrific is that for families? Like,
yeah.
Was it a family orientated kind of cult?
Not really.
Like it was individuals that kind of joined by themselves.
Yeah, and
Did any kids die in the 39?
No kids whatsoever.
Or the 49, sorry.
Yeah, so 39.
39, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, so they put in the videos and they put in a note or a letter saying, "We have exited our vehicles just as we entered them." And one of the guys that got these was a guy called Rio D'Angelo. And if you look up Heaven's Gate, you'll get the video of this guy, bald guy, goatee. He was an ex-member. And he left. I'm not sure why, he still believed it. But he saw this and he told his boss, he's like, "Look, I need to go because there's probably 39 people dead in a house." So he went there, looked around, he got the video, which you can see online now. And then he called the guards and they came around and cleaned up the scene or whatever. But they do interviews of ex-cult members, ex-members of this cult, and they were like, "I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous they got to go and do it." And they're like, would you do it? And they're like, "No, I have to spread the word now, but I missed the comet." Imagine, there was one woman, her husband
it just shows how strong that power of brainwashing people is.
One woman, her husband was beside her, and the husband looked just completely not arsed with it. She was like, "I'm so annoyed that I didn't get to do it. Oh, I'm so annoyed that I missed the comet. I could have been there, but now I just have to spread the word."
Yeah, it is kind of. It's just nuts that, like, you can fall so deep into the trap that's set by these people, and like we're not necessarily saying that these are massive traps. Like, these people could well and truly believe what they preach.
Yeah. It was bit by bit as well. They started as preaching stuff from the Bible, and like it's the same with all of them, because with Heaven's Gate, they started off gradually and whatever, and bit by bit, it was like little nudges. It wasn't just a push off into the deep end that we're going to be extraterrestrial super beings. Same with Jim Jones. He started doing good in the community, and then eventually he started saying he was Vladimir Lenin incarnated again. So yeah, Heaven's Gate.
But I think all of these cults go like that. Like, they exponentially become crazier and crazier. Like, it comes to a point where the leaders kind of see that they have all this power.
Yeah.
And then they're like, fuck, what, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Like, it's like with the Children of God, like, it was a case of once David Berg had that power, like, he could carry out every fantasy he'd ever had because he had all these people induced into a way of thinking that allowed him to have sex with whoever he wanted.
Yeah. So yeah, just to finish off, that happened in March 26th, 1997. 39 active members at the time died, and then there's a few suicides that didn't want to miss the boat. That's probably a very flippant way of saying it.
Yeah.
But,
but like, it's flippant to us, but to those people who did it, like,
that was the best.
They're all in, like,
yeah,
like, I don't know what to think about it, because obviously it involves an insane amount of brainwash, but at the same time, like, I'd be in favor of people having the choice to do that. If, see, that's going to sound bad, because that's like, obviously people commit suicide if they want to commit suicide, and it's a terrible act, and the people around them suffer massively.
Yeah.
But in that, like, those people were dying so happy, and look, if I could go back and change it, I would. Like, I'm not saying it in a way that what happened was, like, a good thing.
Yeah, like, what could you do in that situation? Hold them against their will so they don't kill themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, but
yeah, it's actually a tough thing to think about. But like that, like, see, cults are so crazy because it's if you're a rational person in a normal society, growing up living a normal life, it's crazy to think that people could believe what they believe, but they do. Like,
yeah, even this some stuff you believe, and when you stop believing, you realize how ridiculous the belief is.
You kind of go mad yourself, no? Is that what you're getting at?
As in, like, let's say one example, that absolute cunt, too smart, Alex O'Connor, the Cosmic Skeptic, he turned me vegetarian, and I used to always...
Bear?
What?
Side bear?
Yeah, and then watching another one of his videos, I thought it was on a different topic. He bamboozled me. It was another vegan. So I'm, I can't look at dairy or meat the same way. And I now looking at it, I used to love eating meat and drinking milk and all that, and now I can't look at it the same way at all. I'm thinking now, how could I ever have done that? Even though it was so second nature, and I enjoy doing it, and it was justifiable. And
right, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be one of them militant vegans, vegetarians, that is like, you're disgraceful. But
yeah, that's like the difference between a religious person and a religious person who preaches.
Yeah, just along that point, if you want your mind to be ruined, watch Alex O'Connor's video. He will, Cosmic Skeptic, he'll ruin you.
But another thing with, like you were saying, people coming away from the faith and thinking, how could they've thought that way? With the Children of God one, like I said, like, there's over 100 people who came away from that and killed themselves because they couldn't live with the fact that, the way their life had been set up and the belief system that had been put in place by that cult was this kind of end of days, and they're going to be the ones that are saved in this. And like, when that falls apart, your mind turns into a state of despair and not knowing what's going to happen. And that's one of the really dangerous things about these cults, is that not only are they dangerous in that they can lead you to do things like mass suicides, but they're dangerous in that coming away from them, it can still have a massive effect on your life.
They give you such a false sense of purpose it overrides everything. And that's why it's so powerful. That's why you can convince 914 people to kill themselves. But then when that's left, there's a massive vacuum and you have no hope whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's the trap there. So will we get on to Scientology? We're 105 now.
I don't think it's probably not worth it, no? We can always discuss another episode. Like, there's how many other cults that we can go through. Like, even we could, talk about an episode with Scientology and Mormonism. Like, they're quite similar.
And our good friend Charles Manson. He actually was an avid Scientologist. I didn't know that towards the end.
Was he?
Yeah, he got audited.
Oh,
for
yeah.
100 and something hours or something.
That's pretty whack.
Yeah.
He probably needed all that time.
The prison guard said there was actually a changed man. It did him good after they audited him.
Yes, maybe Scientology is a good thing.
Tune in next week to find out.
Yeah, so we'll definitely do another episode on cults, because like that's 3 topics.
Yeah.
Like the 3 took up well over an hour.
Yeah.
And another three probably as big ones would take up the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any point in rushing in Scientology now. Like, it's pretty interesting and we could flesh it out a fair bit. There's no need.
Yeah. I suppose to summarise, one thing that was common in all the cults was a control of sexual tendencies and behaviours.
Yeah.
In Heaven's Gate, it was...
But the thing with that as well is they're all religious cults based off Christian beliefs. No.
Yeah, they started as their roots in it.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a kind of... Like, all these cults have a link to religion, and a lot of cults do. So, I mean, that gap between religion and a cult is an interesting line. And it's a fine enough line.
Some may say that a cult becomes a religion after 1,000 years or whatever.
Yeah,
Once enough time passes. Because one big draw to cults as well, for someone that believes in Christianity or whatever, is that they can be one of the apostles.
Yeah.
They can be...
It gives you more purpose than your average religion.
Yeah, like you look back on the Bible and think, how could these have persecuted Jesus and the disciples? If I was there, I would have believed them.
Yeah.
Then they get their chance because Jesus has come down for a second time.
Who would have guessed it?
Yeah.
He said he would, so...
And his name is
It's
Jim
only
Jones.
right. And his name is... Fucking... Oh, I can't think of it. I was going to look at Stephen Gandhi Jones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this first video episode. I'm not sure. There's probably parts in that where those listening to the audio alone might feel...
Left out.
I was going to say left out, but at the same time, they're not kids who are going to be crying about being left out. Like, it might just sound weird. But
just watch the video.
Yeah, so this is going to be our first video. We're going to put it up on YouTube. We'll probably put up the whole podcast, and we'll also probably break it up into sections and put those up as well. So go and follow us, or go and subscribe to us on, actually, do you know what, on YouTube. The channel's up. There's no videos up yet, so we'll probably get this up. This will be for Wednesday the 1st. Wednesday the 1st of September. We'll have this video up, so please go and subscribe to that. Maybe give it a like. I don't know, usually YouTubers and stuff say things like that because it helps the algorithm or something. We're also starting a TikTok, so that'll be actually, do you know what, on TikTok as well. So that gives you plenty of avenues to reach us. That's Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Also email if that's any interest to anyone, not that I think it will be as of yet. Write us a letter at the postcode. Put up the postcode next. I think that's it, is it? I suppose it is. We sign off now, so yeah, thank you for listening or watching or however you access the podcast. Alright, good luck. See you.